So what we know about subjective effects of frequency, that as we increase the frequency of stimulation, the energy level goes up, the body awareness goes down, arousal goes up, and focus goes external. So here's something we know in general from stimulating the brain as well as doing biofeedback at these frequencies. At the lower end of the frequencies, the focus is internal, the energy is low, there's relaxation in the system, body awareness is high, and the emotions are peaceful or sad. In the middle range, the focus is balanced. It's like both inside and outside. The energy is medium, body awareness is medium, state is alert, and the emotions are neutral and just present. At higher frequencies, the focus gets externalized, the energy level goes up, and it can go into agitation. The body awareness drops, and the state is more activated. Sometimes can be joyful or agitated, and generally more externally focused or out of the body. And then we come to the idea of gamma, especially when we start looking at meditation. So in the past, meditation research focused on the slow frequencies. Well, we want to get into the body, we want to slow down, we want to have more delta, theta, alpha, and that seemed to be the connection. And at that time, people were not able to detect high frequencies from the brain very well because the brain acts like a filter. The high frequencies don't make it out, and so you can measure them, although the brain's producing them. And as the equipment improved, we found that high frequencies are also relevant to meditation and higher functioning. And so the gamma range, which is all the way from 40 to wherever you want to put it, 200 higher, is also important, although it can be hard to measure from the brain. And so here's a paper showing that in three different meditation traditions, the meditators showed higher gamma brainwave amplitudes, both at rest compared to controls, as well as during meditation. And similar results have been shown for higher functioning experts like mathematicians and musicians. So gamma has something to do with higher functioning in the brain. It turns out that the brain does produce high frequencies, and they can to measure them really well. You have to use cortical recordings. So when there's brain surgery going on, you can put a patch of electrodes on the brain directly, and the skull is not in the way. Then you can really measure these much better. And even the ingestion of psychedelics like DMT has been shown to be associated with higher gamma power being produced in the brain and higher gamma synchrony, which is the synchronization of the waves in time. So over my exploration about this, what I've discovered is that this is a useful way to think about it. You can think of frequencies, power in frequency, as an index to states of awareness or the experience of self. So in the middle range, we have a usual functioning, like low beta, alpha, beta range. We have the usual functioning or social functioning where we use our mind, our intellect, and a conscious self, and more in a usual personal rational realm. If we start to produce more low frequencies and sort of tune down the brain, then we move into the realm of the body, the instinct, the subconscious, the pre-personal, and the pre-rational. So for example, when we do alpha theta training in biofeedback, we increase the amount of theta. The person starts to descend into their feeling body and start to access past memories, more enter the realm of the body and emotion. And delta is the frequency of deep sleep. When you go into the higher ranges, and those are not mutually exclusive, you can do both simultaneously, as you'll see. When you really specifically are looking at the higher frequencies, you'll find that when they are highly more than average present in the brain in terms of power, then you're accessing more like the spirit, intuition, superconscious, transpersonal, and post-rational realms. So here's a experimental device that Belai made for us a while back to experiment with this. So it had a lot more LEDs and was programmable in the frequency that we could stimulate the brain in. So what happens if you stimulate the brain at 100 hertz or 200 hertz or 1000 hertz? And I've done that with current, but actually light is better. I found the light is better. It has a clearer effect. And it's hard to do biofeedback at 1000 hertz because you can't measure it. And if you can't measure it, you can't do biofeedback on it. But you can stimulate the brain at 1000 hertz using pulse light. So what we found is that when we use 40 hertz and above, we support the person to have increased self-observation and equanimity. At 80 hertz, you may get positive feelings, joy, expansion. So also other, it's not exact. Each person is not like this frequency does this. It's not that exact yet. But at higher frequencies, you start to get these reports. A sense of expansion, feeling of self, expansion of the feeling of self, the concept of self. We can try musical note stimulation to see what happens. You get some interesting experiences. And if you're using a lot of high frequency stimulation, you can also get agitation, dissociation, discomfort, and sleep issues. So you get both positive and negative effects. And so what we thought is, how do we produce a balanced meditation state that balances opposing factors? So here's something I know about meditation, that a good meditation states contain a balance of opposing factors. So if you look at like what the Buddha called the 7 factors of enlightenment, then they can be put along multiple axes, like 2 axes, the calming and the energizing. So one of the factors is tranquility. That's what we want to cultivate as a factor of enlightenment. But then the opposing factor that we also need to cultivate is called energy. So they balance each other. You want to be calm and energetic at the same time. Now, another thing that the Buddha recommends we cultivate is equanimity. But as we meditate, we also get feelings of joy and bliss and happiness, and they also need to be cultivated. So they have to be balanced. If you get attached to the joy and bliss, you lose equanimity, and you can get too attached to equanimity and move into a more flat state. Similarly, in our practice and our path, we want to develop concentration, the ability to focus on a single object for a while, but that's not sufficient. We also need to learn to inquire and investigate into the nature of our experience. And they're almost opposing factors, because one is just paying attention to one thing without having any reflection or thought, exploration, just coming back to the breath, coming back to the breath. Investigation is really starting to investigate, what is this experience like? What is it at a more subtle level? What is the brain doing? And that's activating. One is calming, one is activating, one is single pointed, the other is more open, just looking at our experience. So the factors that are in the green are actually cultivated. As they get cultivated, we get increased low frequency activity in the brain. And the factors that are in the red, we get increased high frequency activity in the brain. And something like equanimity is a mixture of both. What we generally decided is that literally you want to move outside the normal narrow range of functioning, and you want to cultivate more high and low simultaneously. And turns out that the brain actually already does that. That phenomenon is called cross frequency coupling. So literally the high frequency waves are time locked or phase locked on the low frequency waves in the brain. And this is what happens, for example, in radio. Radio waves are very long waves, and that long waves can reach along a long distance. That's why you can catch the radio from a long way off. Then the program that you hear in the radio is actually a high frequency wave that's riding on the long wave. The high frequency wave carries the information which rides on a long wave. Same thing happens in the brain. The long waves synchronize the brain across different parts of the brain. And then these gamma waves actually, that's when they happen, is when you get the content, accesses the content. So this is an example of theta gamma coupling in the hippocampus of the rat, where when this activity happens of the sharper high frequency activity waves is when the actual contents are being accessed. And these long, large waves are being used for synchronization. So in our case, we're going to use the long, slow waves and the high frequency waves. in some combination and to produce a balanced state. So what we want to looking at is either sequential or simultaneous stimulation at various frequencies for optimal balanced meditation protocol. So we played around with this and found that there's certain combinations of low and high which produce nice states of expansion, lightness, clarity, reduction in thought, and had different spiritual teachers experiment with it. And the idea is that can we increase the depth, breadth, and flexibility of access to mind states by using this idea of frequency indexing? So I'm currently doing a study based in Tucson on long-term meditators because they don't need a lot of sessions to get see some results, and in which we'll do a number of sessions, 3 to 6 sessions, where we do a placebo stimulation or a active stimulation at various frequencies, ask the person to meditate and see what their response is, and measure the responses using questionnaires and EEG. And uh, and people typically report that when they have this stimulation, it's easier to access certain states, and they just go back right to a meditation retreat state or a trip or journey that they took, and it's just easier to access. And then they can, and there's particular frequencies that they are better for them than others that they can then work with.